Today, I'm here to announce the release of the administration's strategy to mitigate the theft of U.S. trade secrets. Trade secrets are crucial to American global competitiveness, and this strategy sets out a plan for improved coordination to protect them. As President Obama said in the State of the Union, we cannot look back years from now and wonder why we did nothing in the face of real threats to our security and our economy. In the 3 years since I was confirmed as the nation's first intellectual property enforcement coordinator, I have met with hundreds of companies and associations from across our economy. These companies embody the entrepreneurial spirit, the creativity, and the ingenuity that give the United States a clear advantage in the global economy. Because our nation values and protects intellectual property, America leads the world in innovation. Foreign competitors of U.S. corporations, some with ties to foreign governments, have increased their efforts to steal U.S. trade secrets. Our status as a global innovation leader is compromised by those countries who fail to enforce the rule of law or international agreements, or who adopt policies that disadvantage American companies and American workers, including encouraging or tolerating the theft of U.S. trade secrets. The theft of trade secrets impacts national security, undermines our global competitiveness, diminishes U.S. export prospects, and puts American jobs at risk. As an administration, we will be vigilant in addressing threats, including corporate and state-sponsored trade secret theft that jeopardize our status as the world's leader for innovation. We will act vigorously to combat the theft of U.S. trade secrets that could be used by foreign companies or by foreign governments to gain an unfair economic edge. One agency or department alone is not going to solve this problem. We need to all be working together. So the strategy we are announcing today here identifies 5 areas in which the roles and missions of the departments are complementary and mutually reinforcing in achieving the overall goal of mitigating the theft of U.S. trade secrets. First is international engagement. The administration will convey our concerns to countries where there are high incidences of trade secret theft in a coordinated, sustained, and consistent manner at the most senior levels of the administration and in a variety of different forums. It will be very clear to those countries that this is a top priority for the United States. In addition, we will work to build coalitions with countries that share our concerns to support our efforts. We will urge foreign law enforcement to do more, and we will use the full range of our trade policy tools to press other governments for better enforcement. The best outcome is if trade secrets are not stolen in the first place. So a second priority is to work with the private sector to see what steps they can take to reduce the risk of trade secret theft. We will encourage companies to examine their internal operations and policies to determine what more can be done to protect against trade secret theft and to implement best practices to reduce that risk. We will encourage company-to-company sharing of best practices. We believe that companies can work very effectively with one another to identify and to share best practices that can be taken to reduce the risk of trade secret theft. We know there is some good work on this already happening. We want to encourage it, and we want to ask for more of it. Third, law enforcement and the intelligence community will increase law enforcement efforts and improve information sharing with the private sector on the problem of trade secret theft. Investigating and prosecuting trade secret theft is already an area of great focus. I will defer to the Attorney General for more here, but let me take this opportunity to thank him for his tremendous leadership on this issue and all that the Department of Justice does every day. Fourth, our laws need to be as effective as possible. Just a few weeks ago, President Obama signed 2 bills into law that will improve enforcement against trade secret theft and economic espionage. One closed a loophole that would allow the theft of valuable source code to go unpunished. The second raised criminal penalties for economic espionage. However, there may be even more we can do to further improve our laws. Therefore, we will be conducting a review of our domestic legislation to see if there are additional legislative fixes that would improve our ability to enforce. And if they are, we will continue our close partnership with Congress on this issue to make any necessary legislative changes. Lastly, we will continue to raise public awareness on the threat posed by trade secret theft and the serious implications for our economy. The administration is firmly committed to protecting American innovation. In order to lead, succeed, and prosper in the global economy, the administration will use this strategy to put in place an effective and coordinated approach to protect U.S. trade secrets and to encourage our innovators to work together to mitigate the theft of trade secrets by foreign actors. At this time, I'm very pleased to introduce the Attorney General of the United States, the Honorable Eric Holder.
Thank you. Good afternoon. And thank you, Victoria, for those kind words. And thank you all for being here with us today. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to the White House and a privilege to stand with so many friends, key partners, and indispensable allies in introducing the administration's strategy for combating the theft of trade secrets. Now, as Victoria just mentioned, this work is a top priority for the Obama administration, for the entire administration, of course, for the dedicated men and women of the United States Department of Justice. I'm deeply proud of the contributions that my colleagues have made in developing this strategy and the pivotal role that the department will play in its implementation. And I'm really confident that as we bring government agencies and additional private sector partners together to put these plans into action, we'll continue strengthening national efforts to protect the rights, safety, and the best interests of American consumers, innovators, and entrepreneurs. Now, particularly in this time of economic recovery, this work is more important than it ever has been before. Despite the challenges of recent years, American companies remain the most innovative in the world. They are responsible for many of the most important technological advances the world has ever seen, an overwhelming number of the 100 most valuable brands, and almost 30% of global research and development spending, all related to American companies. This level of innovation and the investments that make it possible benefit consumers, create jobs, and support our economy. For instance, in 2011, companies in Silicon Valley added over 42,000 jobs and recorded a growth rate more than 3 times that of the U.S. economy as a whole. But as any of the corporate leaders in this room can attest, this prosperity is a double-edged sword, and it inevitably attracts global rivals, including individuals, companies, and even countries that are eager to tilt the playing field to their advantage. By corrupting insiders, by hiring hackers, and engaging in other unscrupulous and illegal activities, these entities can inflict devastating harm on individual creators, startups, as well as on major companies. Now, as one private security expert has said of the largest U.S. corporations, there are only 2 categories of companies affected by trade secret theft: those that know they've been compromised and those that don't know it yet. Now, this is because as new technologies have torn down traditional barriers to international business and global commerce, they've also made it easier for criminals to steal trade secrets and to do so from anywhere in the world. A hacker in China can acquire source code from a software company in Virginia without leaving his or her desk. A few keystrokes, a terminated or a simply unhappy employee of a defense contractor can misappropriate designs, processes, and formulas worth billions of dollars. Now, some of these criminals exploit pilfered secrets themselves, often by extorting the victim company or starting their own enterprise. Others try to sell the illicit information to a rival company or attain a bounty from a country that's interested in encouraging such theft. And all of these people, all of these examples represent a significant and steadily increasing threat to America's economy and national security interests. Now, fortunately, the men and women of the United States Department of Justice, and in particular Lanny Breuer, who's the head of our criminal division, are working tirelessly to prevent, combat, and to punish these serious crimes. Thanks to the efforts of 40 prosecutors and 4 computer forensic experts serving in the Computer Crime and Intellectual Property Section, better known as CSIPs, and more than 230 specially trained prosecutors stationed at U.S. attorneys' offices around the country, including 25 computer hacking and intellectual property, or CHIP units, I'm pleased to report that we are fighting back more aggressively and more collaboratively than ever before. And with approximately 240 FBI agents in the field dedicated to investigating IP crime, along with officials from U.S., the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and 20 additional state, federal, and international law enforcement agencies that are partners at the IPR Center, we are poised to build on our recent successes. Now, I'm proud, very proud of the outstanding work that these professionals are leading every day in offices really all across the country. But I also recognize, as do all of you, that the Justice Department won't be able to continue making the progress that we need and that our citizens and companies deserve on its own. We need to increase in cooperation. We need to increase coordination between partners at every level of government. We need to improve engagement with the corporations represented in this room today. We need to find ways to work together more efficiently and more effectively by allowing the roadmap set forth in the administration's new comprehensive strategy. And we need to do so starting immediately, because continuing technological expansion and accelerating globalization will lead to a dramatic increase in the threat posed by trade secret theft in the years ahead. In fact, by 2015, experts believe that the number of smartphones, tablets, laptops, and other internet access devices in use will roughly double the total that existed in 2010. In the same period, the proliferation of cloud-based computing will significantly enhance flexibility and productivity for workers all around the world. But these same forces will also create more access points and more vulnerabilities that allow criminals to steal confidential information. Just as increasing globalization will enable American companies of all sizes to benefit from foreign technical experts and research and development activities in other countries, the sharing of trade secrets with entities operating in nations with weak rule of law may expose them to intellectual property losses. Any resulting cost advantages will likely be more than offset by losses in proprietary company information. Now, unfortunately, these projections, these thoughts, aren't merely hypothetical. We've seen this phenomenon before, including in the late 1990s when I had the privilege of serving as Deputy Attorney General. Between 1997 and 2000, Internet usage in the United States more than doubled. And this massive technological shift also brought about major changes in the nature of crime. For instance, in 1999 alone, we saw a 30% spike in intellectual property cases over the previous year. In order to fight back, in July of that year, I announced the department's first major IP strategy known as the Intellectual Property Rights Initiative. Now, of course, we've all come a long way since then. As critical technologies have advanced, criminals have adapted accordingly. Our need to keep pace with these changes remains imperative, and the stakes have never really been higher. In some industries, a single trade secret can be worth millions or even billions of dollars. Trade secret theft can require companies to lay off employees, close factories, to lose sales and profits, to experience a decline in competitive position and advantage, or even to go out of business. And this type of crime can have significant impacts not only on our country's economic well-being, but on our national security as well, allowing hostile states to obtain data and technology that could endanger American lives, expose our energy, financial, or other sensitive sectors to massive losses, or make our infrastructure more vulnerable to attack. Now, in response, the Justice Department has made the investigation and the prosecution of trade secret theft a top priority. And this is why the National Security Division's counter-espionage section has taken a leading role in economic espionage cases and others affecting national security and the export of military and strategic commodities or technology. It's also why, in 2010, I established an internal task force on intellectual property led by Deputy Attorney General Jim Cole and other senior department leaders to improve and to expand our enforcement efforts in this area. And it's why the FBI has increased its focus on trade secret theft and its use of sophisticated tools and techniques in conducting national security and criminal investigations. Now, of course, most trade secret matters are dealt with in civil court. But when the Justice Department receives referrals, we investigate and, when appropriately, prosecute those matters fairly as well as completely. And although the primary legislation creating criminal liability for these acts is less than 20 years old, federal law enforcement officials have established what I think is a remarkable record of success in this area. In the decade between 2001 and 2011, we secured well over 100 convictions in cases involving criminal trade secret thefts and 6 convictions in economic espionage cases. For instance, in December 2011, a federal court in Indiana sentenced a man from China to more than 7 years in prison after his conviction on charges of economic espionage on behalf of a foreign university tied to the Chinese government. Last September, in New Jersey, a jury convicted another Chinese native of trade secret theft and other charges for stealing information from a defense contractor about the performance and the guidance systems for missiles and other military hardware. And last November, in Michigan, a former General Motors engineer and her husband were convicted of conspiring to steal more than $40 million worth of trade secrets from GM with the intent to use them in a joint venture with an automotive company, a competitor in China. Now, in these and in many other cases, as we've refined our approach and increased our understanding of these crimes and increased our understanding of those who commit them, the Department has also gathered valuable intelligence about foreign-based economic espionage. We have forged really strong relationships with law enforcement partners, private sector experts, and international allies. And we've begun to raise awareness about the truly devastating impact of these crimes and to encourage companies to report suspected breaches to law enforcement so that violators can be caught, so that they can be brought to justice, and so that they can be kept from striking again. So as we carry this work into the future, thanks to the support and the assistance of everyone here today and the cutting-edge strategy that we are committed to implementing, I'm confident that we'll continue to make great strides in the fight against trade secret theft. We'll keep improving our ability to crack down on intellectual property infringement and economic espionage. And together, we will ensure that the United States is and always will be the world leader in innovation. At this time, it's my privilege to introduce another key leader in this work, the Deputy Secretary of Commerce, Rebecca Blank, who will provide more information about the administration's ongoing efforts in this regard. Rebecca?
Thank you much, Eric, and I want to particularly thank Victoria for her excellent leadership on this issue over many months and even many years here in the White House. Protecting the intellectual property and the trade secrets of U.S. companies has never been more critical to our ability to innovate and to compete in America. Just last year, the Commerce Department studied the impact of industries that are substantial users of intellectual property protection, such as patents and trademarks. We found that nearly 35% of our GDP comes from industries that rely very heavily on intellectual property. These industries accounted for more than half of the goods we export by value, and they support about 40 million good-paying jobs. Trade secrets are a unique form of intellectual property, in that, unlike the patents and the trademarks we studied, their value comes from other businesses not knowing about them. Their total economic value to our economy is hard to measure, but is clearly substantial, and therefore they require unique protection and enforcement efforts on behalf of the U.S. government. Trade secrets are crucial to helping our entrepreneurs and our businesses start, grow, and innovate. When someone steals a trade secret, it undermines the company's ability to compete in the global marketplace. It poses a threat to the business, to its workers, and to our economy overall. Ultimately, spying and attempted theft of trade secrets from American businesses is only accelerating right now. That's why we're taking a coordinated government-wide approach to this issue. The Commerce Department is going to play a key role. For example, our Patent and Trademark Office and our International Trade Administration will be doing more to understand how trade secret protection laws work in the countries where our businesses trade. We will also reach out to foreign governments to help strengthen enforcement and be more active in helping resolve disputes. In addition, as we all learned last week, the President issued a new executive order on cybersecurity. Through it, our National Institute of Standards and Technology, which sits at the Department of Commerce, is supporting an industry-driven effort to identify and share best practices. We believe that this new framework will ultimately help improve the resiliency of businesses and prevent theft. And finally, we are reaching out directly to U.S. businesses operating both here and abroad to educate them in how to protect their own trade secrets. This includes everything from conducting intellectual property awareness campaigns and promoting places like stopfakes.gov to one-on-one meetings where we discuss sensitive concerns that a company might have about a particular market. Overall, we're going to work more closely with Justice, State Departments, with the U.S. Trade Representative's Office, and the intelligence community, with the private sector, and with our trading partners around the world to make sure we are doing everything possible to reduce the threat of trade secret theft. My hope is that we will continue to find ways to allow American businesses and workers to compete fairly on a global scale, while ensuring that our entrepreneurial spirit continues to drive America's prosperity and our economy here at home. So thank you all for being in attendance here today. I look forward to seeing these new efforts move forward. I look forward to hearing about how today's conversation goes. Both the Attorney General and I have to go off to other events, so we're going to leave Victoria behind to answer all the hard questions. But I know you've got a great agenda plan, so thank you.
I'll just briefly introduce our next speaker. I'm so pleased to have the Undersecretary for Economic Affairs, Robert Hormats, here to join us today. And with that, I will turn the microphone over to him.
Thank you, Victoria. Well, I want to thank Victoria for two things. One, for her kindness in inviting me to speak this afternoon, and also for her enormously powerful leadership of this whole exercise. This has really been a remarkable exercise. Under Victoria's leadership, we've had all the key agencies of government, as you've gotten a sample of just a few moments ago, working on this subject. This is a high priority for the President and the Vice President and for the President's team. And Victoria is the person not only who pulls it together, but really exercises the leadership to make it happen. And the report that you have today, the strategy to mitigate the theft of trade secrets, is really a product of the hard work that she and her team have undertaken over many months, indeed over the last 3.5 years. Let me say at the outset that for many reasons, jobs, business profitability, health, safety, and the support of our most innovative and creative industries, protection of intellectual property and trade secrets is a core economic and foreign policy interest of the United States. In today's world, global competition is based on innovative advantage. Governments around the world are building upon the success of America's very innovative ecosystem, emulating our research universities, our innovation clusters all around the country, our venture capital industry, and other parts of this very dynamic and indeed very successful ecosystem that has been built up over the course of many decades. Regrettably, however, in order to gain an edge, some governments are also pursuing a mercantilist set of policies, and some companies and governments are pursuing downright illegal policies and programs to gain competitive advantage. Subsidies, forced localization, and in particular IPR and trade secret theft can have a chilling effect on innovation globally. These governments, and some cases companies that are engaged in this process as well, are gaming the global economic system to their advantage and to the detriment of others. As a result, American businesses are finding it increasingly difficult to capture the full economic value of their investment and their innovation. To reverse this trend, to level the playing field, it is critical for American innovators and inventors to know that their intellectual property is being protected, and for businesses around this country to know that their trade secrets will actually remain secret. Such protection has a major and beneficial impact on jobs in and the profitability of some of our most competitive companies in this country. This is true wherever the threat occurs. Our goal is to identify and utilize a wider range of policies and measures in order to deal with this growing threat. For example, with respect to China, and I want to emphasize China is not the only country, but let me use China as an important example. With respect to China, protection of intellectual property and trade secrets remains a serious and highly troubling issue. That's why cybersecurity and the protection of IPR and trade secrets are among the main items that we have discussed with the Chinese over the years in our annual strategic security dialogue that we hold with the Chinese, and indeed in other discussions like the strategic and economic dialogue, which is held annually with China as well. We have repeatedly raised our concerns about trade secret theft by any means at the highest levels with senior Chinese officials, and we will continue to do so. Our message is actually quite clear. The protection of intellectual property rights and trade secrets is critical to all rights holders, whether they be from the United States or whether they are for Chinese companies as well, or for other companies around the world. This is a matter of principle, and indeed there are many Chinese companies that are just as concerned about the protection of intellectual property rights as American companies, because increasingly the Chinese are developing intellectual property as well. So it's not that this is just a bilateral issue. There are powerful forces in China who share this view, and indeed there are people in other countries who have generated intellectual property who share this view as well. So it's not a bilateral issue so much as it is an issue of companies that have intellectual property wanting to ensure that it's protected. And we have a particular interest, of course, in protecting American intellectual property. Our approach with the Chinese increasingly engages with Chinese officials and NGOs in China who themselves have an interest in IPO protection and trade secret protection. And as I said before, China isn't the only country. This is a country which does pose serious problems. There are other countries that do it as well, and we're making a major effort to engage with them and to address the problems that they pose. So this is a broad issue and a major issue of concern as other countries engage in similar kinds of practices. We're making the same case with these other countries where the threat of IP theft or piracy is very high. And recently in India on a trip, I described the concerns we have with that country. We've had similar conversations with Russia and other countries as well. The Department of State, under the leadership of Victoria, who's, as I say, done a great job, we're coordinating on a regular basis. But the State Department can play a strong role as part of this team, and we are playing a strong role as part of this team because of the coordination that's going on. We also work with other key agencies, which you've heard represented here, and my colleague Demetrius will be speaking in a little while. So there's a strong degree of unity here, but the State Department has certain advantages, particularly the embassies that we have around the world and the consulates that we have around the world, and the fact that frequently the Secretary of State and others make trips around the world. So we try to mobilize all of our forces as well to identify both bilateral and multilateral opportunities with countries with the goal of creating a more rules-based global economic system where trade secrets are respected and where trade secrets are protected. The theme of creating a transparent, fair, rules-based global business environment where companies can compete on the basis of their products and services, because we believe our products and services are competitive if we can compete on a level playing field, is at the heart of the State Department's Economic Statecraft Initiative. Economic statecraft highlights economics as a central component of our diplomacy and of our foreign policy throughout the globe. Promoting strong IP protection and enforcement fits squarely into the Department's global economic statecraft agenda. We're coordinating again, as I say, with Victoria and her team to make sure that where there are problems that are perceived by an American company, we hear about them, we coordinate on them, and we take action in the various parts of the world where those problems emerge. The strategy being released today adds to our international engagement on trade secrets in several important ways. First of all, we will enhance and track even more effectively our diplomatic engagement by senior administration officials with any country where there are trade secret problems. This will allow senior administration officials to deliver a coordinated message to foreign governments on trade secrets and send a clear signal that significantly reducing trade secret theft is a high priority for the United States. We will work also with our foreign counterparts to improve legal frameworks in order to provide strong and efficient remedies for trade secret theft victims. And this is extremely important as well. It's not just important that there be tough laws, it's important that there be tough enforcement of those laws and consistent enforcement of those laws. And we will leverage the full scope of our diplomatic resources, what we call our force in the field, which is the U.S. embassies and consulates. We will strive to improve communication and coordination inside of our diplomatic missions and among our diplomatic missions so that they can learn from one another on best practices as well, and set forward concrete steps for our embassies and consulates to engage host governments on trade secret issues. And finally, we will enhance engagement on trade secret theft issues with U.S. industry representatives that are working both in the United States and abroad. I and my colleagues in the department frequently meet with representatives of U.S. companies in Washington and during my travels around the world where I meet with AmChams and others to discuss their concerns, to discuss specific issues that they have, and to discuss the optimum ways of addressing these kinds of things. This strategy that has been unveiled today marks yet another step in achieving improved results to deal with these issues in a robust way, and we at the State Department are eager to play and enthusiastic about playing a substantial role. We look forward to working with all the members of the team that Victoria has assembled, and of course with the U.S. business community. We have three key representatives here, Karan, Dean, and John, all of whom are very actively involved in this. We talk very regularly with them and other businesses in order to get their input. So I want to congratulate everyone who has worked on this report and to simply let people know that they should feel very free to come to the State Department where they have problems. Many of the companies represented here do already, and we hope many more will take advantage of this because our aim is to follow this up. As I say, it is a core element of our foreign policy and a core element of our diplomacy, and we aim to follow up. And this report gives us added impetus and added ammunition in order to do that. So my final role is to introduce my very good friend, Demetrius Marantis, who is Deputy U.S. Trade Representative and with whom I collaborate on a regular, virtually 2 to 3 times a day basis. So, Demetrius, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I want to jump on the We Love Victoria Espinel bandwagon as well and just compliment Victoria and her office for the amazing job that they did in putting together this strategy. You know, it's no secret to all of you in the room. You heard from the Attorney General, you heard from Dr. Blank, you heard from Undersecretary Hormats how important it is to prevent the misappropriation of trade secrets and to prevent the theft of trade secrets. And the strategy that Victoria and her team have laid out will really help increase the potency of our efforts in leveraging, government resources across agencies to do this. And from sort of the geeky trade negotiator perspective, I think it's really important for our trading partners to see the critical attention that the administration is placing on fighting the misappropriation of trade secrets and really ensuring that our intellectual property is protected and enforced in foreign markets. You all know how important trade secrets are. I'm not going to go into that. What I'd like to talk a little bit about is the work that we're doing at USTR on the trade secret issue. We are moving on a whole variety of fronts. We're moving in the context of international negotiations. We're working bilaterally on trade secret related issues with some key some key trading partners, and we're also trying to incorporate the protection of trade secrets in the work that we do in non-IP areas like investment. So let me give you an example. We are currently negotiating, as many of you know, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is an 11-country negotiation that is seeking to achieve the highest standards in a whole variety of areas. One very important innovation that we're pursuing this year, or pursuing in the context of TPP, is in the area of trade secrets. For the first time ever, the United States is proposing provisions that offer right holders remedies similar to those provided under U.S. law, including criminal penalties and procedures for trade secret theft. I don't know if you all know Prabir Mehta. Prabir is our TPP IP negotiator, and he is fighting the fight on this one. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, direct them at him, not at me. Additionally, in TPP, we are also negotiating a chapter on technical barriers to trade, where we're proposing a provision that would basically say that governments should not require companies to disclose proprietary formulas as part of the product registration process unless there's a legitimate need for doing so and the government has a mechanism for protecting the disclosed data. So hopefully the TPP will serve as a model for trade negotiations going forward as how you can use our trade agreements to protect trade secrets. We're also working on trade secrets bilaterally. Bob talked a bit about the work that we're doing in China as part of the JCCT, the Joint Commission on Commerce and Trade, as well as in the Strategic and Economic Dialogue. Last year in the SNED, China affirmed that the protection of trade secrets is an important part of intellectual property protection and that it would intensify its enforcement efforts against trade secret misappropriation. Kier Alvarez is our negotiator who deals with IP-related issues with China. We are also working in the context of our bilateral investment treaties to address this issue. We and the State Department together are proposing binding disciplines that would prohibit the forced transfer of technology as well as requiring the use of domestic technology. We also have a mechanism which many of you are near and dear to many of your hearts, which is our Special 301 report. That highlights those partners that do not adequately protect intellectual property, including trade secrets. We're going to devote even more attention to trade secrets in the annual Special 301 process. As part of this new strategy, we're going to increase our work on action plans, on out-of-cycle reviews, and related tools that we have in the Special 301 context to gather and where appropriate act on information about the lack of trade secret protection and enforcement by U.S. trading partners. Elizabeth Kenzel deals with Special 301 in our IP office. We have in the past, as many of you know, used many of these tools already to address trade secret theft and will continue to do so. And so let me just end where I started, which was by commending Victoria and the whole team for the great efforts that have been put into developing this strategy. Trade obviously is an integral part of it. You know, we hope to use the various tools that we have at our disposal to really address a growing and concerning issue. And with that, let me turn the podium over to Frank Montoya, who is the National Counterintelligence Executive, and he bears responsibility for leading the counterintelligence and security activities for the U.S. government. And so, Frank, over to you.
Thank you. Otherwise known as the squeaky wheel. It is a great privilege to be here amongst this august company and to be able to talk about this. Thank you very much for your leadership on this process. And for the opportunity that you have given to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, but more particularly to the National Counterintelligence Executive, to play a role in this truly whole-of-government approach to protecting trade secrets, American trade secrets. That really is an important aspect of what we do in the national counterintelligence these days. It is a 21st century national security issue. There's no question about it. But if I may paraphrase a very 20th century leader, President Dwight D. Eisenhower, you can't have good national security if you don't have good economic security. Now, again, rough paraphrase, okay, so don't quote me. But the point being is it really is important that, especially from an American business perspective, and innovation is a key element of our success over the decades. If we can't protect innovation, then we don't have the opportunity to be successful, to grow our economy, to have a successful impact economically on the families that make up this great country. And if we can't protect them, if we can't provide them with a way to generate the economic success that we have over the past 200 plus years of our existence, we can't expect to have a national security that is worth leaving behind for our children. So it's very important that we play a key role as an intelligence community in this element, or this effort, this whole of government effort really, to protect trade secrets in the United States. The key element of this effort, however, is working together. If we don't do that well, we will continue to suffer when it comes to the protection of our trade secrets, when it comes to maintaining our ability to innovate. It is absolutely essential that we do that. And through these efforts, where we're strengthening the laws, where we're improving the enforcement of those laws, where we're enforcing the application of penalties for violation of these laws, when we're doing that robustly and as a government, we're going to be able to do the things that are necessary to preserve our way of life, to preserve where we are in the world today. And that is absolutely essential. Now, what is the intelligence role or part of that process? Well, very specifically, when it comes to this strategy, it's about identifying in those instances when there is a foreign nexus, or there are entities that have a foreign nexus that are taking advantage of us from a trade secrets perspective. It's very important in that respect that we not only identify those foreign powers or foreign nexi, but that we are able to take the information that we have and share it with those that are most affected. For instance, the companies, the American companies that we have relationships with. That private-public sector interaction is absolutely essential to helping us achieve the goal of protecting state or these trade secrets. It's absolutely essential. And so one of the things that we will be doing as the National Counterintelligence and through the Office of the Director of National Intelligence is increasing our ability to outreach, our expanding the threat and warning that we are able to provide to the private sector, working together with them in a concerted effort to protect those the elements of their business that are most essential to their continued success. You're going to hear some stories today, I think, from the panel that absolutely illustrate why this is important, why we need to be shoulder to shoulder with them in this effort, why we need to bring to bear the abilities of the intelligence community, the United States intelligence community, to assist them in these efforts, why we need to do a better job of working together, whether it's through the Department of Defense and the intelligence community entities that are part of the Department of Defense, with the FBI, not only from a law enforcement perspective, but from their intelligence perspectives as well, and utilizing those capabilities, and to other members of the intelligence community and their ability, working with State Department, for instance, throughout the world, to take advantage of our relationships with our foreign partners, to improve our foreign engagement, to make sure that we're all talking about the same things and trying to protect what is most important to protect. I started this by saying that I'm also known as the squeaky wheel. Well, there is also an old adage that the counterintelligence professional in the room is also the one that says no or likes to say no. And that's not the perspective that we want to convey either. We know we have to engage. We know that our business partners are engaged internationally, that they have lots of partners in a lot of different places. The idea is not to prevent that, not to chill it, but to enable it, to enhance it, to make it better, and to utilize the full resources of the United States intelligence community to do so. So again, we are very grateful to be partners in this endeavor. We really do think that working together as a community, as a government, we are going to be very successful in preserving what is necessary to preserve, as not only as a country from a national security perspective, but also that economic edge that our businesses have enjoyed for so many years. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and what I would like to do now then is introduce Assistant Attorney General Lanny Breuer, who is going to be our panel moderator today. Assistant Attorney General Breuer is the Assistant Attorney General of the Criminal Division at the Department of Justice. Lanny, thank you.
Well, thank you, Frank. I'm really delighted to be here and delighted to join all of you as the administration launches its strategy on how to combat trade secret theft. Obviously, a remarkably important issue and one that, as we all know, has such national security and economic consequences. I'm not original, and so I will do what everybody else did, which is to thank Victoria. She really has been an extraordinary leader with great charisma and great commitment, and I think it's why we're all here today. And we at the Department, from the Attorney General to me, to everyone involved, really have tried to be real partners with Victoria and with the administration as a whole, because, of course, it does take an administration, a government as a whole approach to deal with this really remarkably serious problem. The speakers that you've already heard from have really laid out sort of the consequences here, why trade secret theft is really so remarkably important, why we have to fight corporate insiders who take advantage of information that they have. Those consequences and those from the outside literally can force companies to close their doors and for folks to lose their jobs. And of course, we've all just seen the report from a particular company as reported in the New York Times. One company, perhaps a state-sponsored company, had such devastating effects in what it has been able to do over the last years. According to the report, 141 companies have had their trade secrets, their most valuable assets, compromised in 20 different industries. Just think about that. It really runs the gamut of what we all do, 20 different industries, whether it's blueprints or proprietary information, manufacturing processes, test results, business plan, pricing documents, partnership agreements. It goes on and on and on. All were taken, all were stolen. It's as simple as that. They were stolen. And that was just from one company, one group. It's really quite extraordinary. And so we have to figure out how we're going to deal with insiders who are bribed, hackers who come in and take what is not theirs, who really take the very proprietary information that companies in the United States and really around the world deem and have that are so valuable. You already heard from the Attorney General. You've heard from distinguished speakers. I guess what I would say to you is we at the Department of Justice care deeply about this, and I recognize as the head of the Criminal Division that prosecuting these cases is very important. But it's only one piece of the solution. We alone cannot, and I've said it before, and the Attorney General has said, we can't prosecute our way out of this problem. What we need is with industry partners such as all of you, and I applaud what all of you are doing, with our partners, we need to figure out a way together to deal with this situation. And of course, that's why Victoria wants us here and what has brought us here today. So far today you've heard from those in the government, but of course it's industry that really is bearing the price of the kinds of crimes we're talking about. And so what we're going to do for the next few minutes is have a discussion with three very eminent leaders of industry. I begin with Karan Bhatia, who is the Vice President and Senior Counsel of Global Government Affairs and Policy for General Electric. We all know that General Electric is really involved in everything, and it's one of the largest companies in the world, dealing with electricity and lighting, dealing with jet engines and locomotives, and media and entertainment, and on and on. Before joining GE, Bhatia was also with the U.S. Trade Representative. He was the Deputy U.S. Trade Representative. He was the Assistant Secretary for Aviation and International Affairs at the Department of of Transportation. He was, in fact, also the Deputy Undersecretary and Chief Counsel at the Commerce Department, and before that, he was a partner at Wilmer. I'd like to know what he does for fun. Next to him is John, and John Powell is the Vice President and General Counsel and Corporate Secretary of American Superconductor. John is going to be able to talk a lot about American Superconductor, which is a leading provider, a small company in wind and power grid products and services worldwide. He's been there since 1999, and before that was IP counsel at Raytheon. And furthest to the left is Dean Garfield, who's the president and CEO of Information Technology Industry Council. As president and CEO of ITI, Dean leads a global trade association that represents many of the leading innovative companies of our country and the world in the communications technology sector. Before joining ITI as its president, he was executive vice president and chief strategic officers for the Motion Picture Association industry. And he's also a regular contributor to the Huffington Post. So with that, let me start with our panelists and begin the discussion. And let me begin with you, Karan. How, Karan, does a company as large as General Electric approach the very basic challenge of protecting itself and preventing trade secret theft?
Well, maybe I could start, Lanny, by first of all just thanking you, thanking Victoria for the invite today. This is a fabulous gathering, and as a company like GE, whose stock in trade for more than 130 years, going back to our founder, Thomas Edison, has really been innovation, we appreciate the critical importance of intellectual property rights and trade secrets in not only stimulating economic growth, but also finding solutions to the biggest problems that the world faces. So we're delighted to be here. How does a company like GE approach it? We approach trade secret protection as really being sort of part of a map. We see really three parts to it. One is contractual obligations. We spend an awful lot of time making sure we try and protect our technology as effectively as possible through our contractual agreements. We do business all over the world. We have partners. We have suppliers. All of those pose to some extent a degree of risks, and so strong contractual protections are key. Secondly, statutory registrations, patents, copyrights. We have a substantial focus on really being best in class in that area. And then third, getting the right sets of processes and resources around controlling access to the core technology. And that itself has really three parts to it as well. The first is identification. The core to this is finding out what are your crown jewels, identifying them, constantly refreshing that, making sure you understand what the key technology is, and really singling that out for special heightened focus. Secondly, monitoring and prevention. We monitor the network and assets, both physical and electronic, constantly. We watch for patterns of activities that may indicate theft. So that is a substantial effort at our company. It's one we place a great deal of emphasis on. And then third, we take action where warranted. We will investigate suspicious activities. Sometimes we'll interview employees about suspicious downloads. We have an entire program called Data Loss Prevention that really gets at this risk. And where warranted, we work closely with law enforcement, with the government in the United States and around the world. And the actions we pursue will be tailored to the specific circumstances we face. So that's sort of in a nutshell how we go about it.
Dean, did you want to jump in? I know you represent a number of large companies as well.
I thought Karan covered it well.
Okay. Karan, then you mentioned a moment ago that among the different factors you use is you obviously protect your rights. You're willing to ensure that if you need to, you may have to go into court. You will obviously register that which is yours. But, of course, many countries around the world have a weaker regime, weaker rule of law than perhaps we in the United States do, and we probably, too, could improve. So given that GE tries very forcefully to protect its rights, from your perspective, what can countries who have weaker rules of law do to make industry more protected, and what here in the United States do you think we could do to better protect companies such as GE?
You know, Lenny, it's exactly the right point because the strength of rule of law, the strength of protections, the strength of processes around the world really is key to enabling companies like ours not only to access markets around the world, but feel comfortable investing in those markets, creating jobs, creating innovation there, which frankly is in their country's best interest as well as ours. There are changes that we'd recommend happen not only in the United States but around the world. I'll mention 4 in particular. You know, the first has to do here in the United States with the ability to prosecute actors that are engaged in trade secret theft. We applaud some of the recent amendments to the EAA that were adopted, but we think there's more that can be done specifically, and specifically to target, enable prosecutorial resources to target actions and people outside of the United States, people not American citizens, or actions that happen abroad. Secondly, in thinking about cybersecurity and thinking how we approach cybersecurity, you know, we believe that the best approach is one that enables government and industry to work together collaboratively, perhaps through a set of voluntary standards, those that enable industry to really bring its innovative capacity. We don't think that standards that dictate certain approaches or certain outcomes are right, but we do want to work together very closely to achieve higher voluntary standards around cybersecurity. The third, and this was alluded to before, but the importance of creating the kinds of regimes and levels of comfort that are going to allow business and industry to work together, establishing safe harbors so that we can exchange information with collaborators, with other members of industry, with government, that are going to enable us to do this, whether it's exemptions in the antitrust laws or whatever they're required to do that. And then lastly, I think there's a huge global component to this, and it was alluded to before, but I think whether it's capacity building, and we think there's more that can be done there, whether it's working through trade agreements, and I applaud Demetrius's efforts and USTR's efforts in that area, bilateral dialogue, I think all of that can have an important impact in working to help our trading partners around the world strengthen their trade secret laws to enable us to feel comfortable.
Yeah, if I could, sure. Picking up on that last point, I think to the extent that we can work to persuade other markets that it's in their national best interest as well, that we serve ourselves well. And so if we can point to strong trade secrets protection that actually help markets to innovate and reinforce that an important part of the innovation ecosystem that other markets are trying to recreate is having a strong trade protection laws. I think to the extent that countries realize that we encourage the type of innovation that they want to see, but we want to see it develop through global standards. And so working in that stead, I think, is quite important.
You know, interestingly, based on the points that both Karan and Dean made, I should point out that some months ago, I was privileged to announce a prosecution of Cologne Industries, a South Korean company that the United States alleges stole the proprietary information of various companies, both companies in the United States like DuPont, but also, frankly, a Japanese company. And there, not only have we indicted the company, but we will seek to extradite the individuals. That may take many, many years. We may or may not succeed in our extraditions. But I think it's a very, very important point that we're making and very much follows up on what you're saying. And similarly, we in the department, often with the funding of the State Department, do in fact have resident legal advisors around the world, lawyers who are working with their counterparts. And often in this space, what they're doing, some of whom are called IPLEX, they're trying to work with other countries to in fact develop the very kinds of processes and strong rule of law that was being discussed. Dean, just sort of jumping off from that point, obviously ITI represents, I think, 50 or so of America's biggest and most innovative high-tech companies. So what, in your view, does ITI do to encourage its members to focus on the threat of trade secret theft and really to share best practices among themselves?
3 things, principally. And I would say it's less ITI specific than the innovation sector generally. One is an issue that Victoria started with at the beginning, and like everyone else, I should thank Victoria and Rob for their leadership in this area. I know it feels like Valentine's Day all over again, but with all the love we're throwing at you, but it's well deserved. This is a growing global problem, and it's important that we learn lessons and convene and look at best practices across geographic boundaries, and we're working to do that. So that's one. Two is working across industry silos. You know, there are a lot of different strands of the innovation ecosystem, and oftentimes it's our tendency to, you know, work in the semiconductor industry or in the photovoltaic or otherwise. But in order to share best practices and work effectively, we've got to work across those industry silos to make sure we're getting the best out of those best practices and optimizing our learning. The third and final thing I would say is making sure that we're building on existing infrastructure, if you will, that are advancing sharing of best practices. And so, for example, there was an organization created in the private sector a year and a half ago called CREATE, the Center for Responsible Enterprise and Trade, that's focused on sharing best practices among industry. The government is playing an important, or the public sector is playing an important role in that regard as well, while NIST works quite collaboratively with the private sector in advancing consensus-based voluntary standards. And so helping to support and advance those public sector and private sector initiatives, I think, is quite important. The part of the reason that we've all been showering so much love on Victoria and the work here is, I think, a recognition that we can do a lot more. And so the convening power and the catalyst for action that comes out of this event, I think, will be quite important, and it will be a motivation for us as well to put added emphasis on these issues, not only as ITI, but in conjunction with all of our companies who are really driving innovation in this country and globally.
Dean, a few moments ago, Karan was talking about what GE does and talked about when it will work with law enforcement. Having seen what a number of different companies do, when a company, from your perspective, becomes a victim of trade secret theft, what have you determined are the factors that that company relies on when it determines that it'll either pursue civil remedies and perhaps file suit against the perpetrators, or in fact refer the case criminally to the Department of Justice?
Well, I think it's a great question. As you and Attorney General Holder noted at the beginning, in the vast majority of instances, the remedy that companies pursue is through their civil remedies. I think a part of the benefit of this event and the work that's been done on this report is that we'll have greater clarity around what it takes to advance a criminal case. I think, as a general matter, there isn't a great understanding of the thresholds, for instance, on when the U.S. government will pursue a case and when it will not. And so most of the remedies are focused on the areas that Karan identified, which is, you know, looking at what you can do to protect your own trade secrets, as well as the contractual remedies you may have developed in advancing that civilly.
One point I'd make there, and I think there's been an evolution, but I think from our perspective, we'd also say that there has been historically a bit of a reticence by certain companies to come forward and to say that our intellectual property was stolen because they were worried about how the market would react. Absolutely. And so they haven't come forward. And of course, one of our real goals is to encourage the private sector to come forward. And I'd like to think under the Attorney General's leadership, we've shown we very aggressively go after the perpetrators.
If I could add one point to that, Lanny, one of the things that I think is endemic to the community that I have the privilege of representing is that they're the best and most dynamic innovators in the world, many of whom are in this room today. And so oftentimes the instinct is we can out-innovate anyone. Right. And so these trade secret thefts are critically important, but will move so fast that they won't be able to keep up. I think the thing that we're seeing and learning is that's in part true, but not completely. And so the efforts of yours and the Attorney General more broadly to exercise a willingness to advance these cases, I think will help in moving and shifting that perspective.
Great. John, I want to turn to you, and obviously to some degree your experience and your company's experience is the most raw of all and very real. So AMSC of course, has been the victim of the theft of a trade secret. One of your employees, of course, stole the trade secret and, in fact, was convicted in Austria of doing just that. Can you talk a little bit about us and tell us the lessons that AMSC has learned from this very unfortunate episode?
Sure. Before I do that, though, I'd like to also say it's an honor to be part of this panel. I'd like to thank Victoria for inviting me to attend, as well as Ron Rowe. Appreciate that very much. I'd also like to say that over the course of this last year and a half or so that we've gone through this process, the U.S. government has been a tremendous ally. In particular, Ambassador Marantis and his team have been very supportive and a true asset to our cause. In terms of lessons learned, I'd say the primary lesson we learned is no matter how secure you are in terms of your products and your networks from external threats, internal threats, your employees can probably be the most serious and difficult to detect threats. So, with that, I think all companies have to keep that in mind, in particular small companies. You need to do whatever you can to protect from external threats. That's a given. These are real, and you've got to assume that they're going to happen. So you've got to take all the right precautions to protect your network and your products. Again, the internal threats are very, very challenging. The things that we've done to protect against the internal threats are compartmentalizing trade secrets, identify our trade secrets, and put them on separate, in our case, it was a software source code. So we put them on separate servers. We limit access to our engineering and R&D teams to a very low percentage of the overall code. We know that we have to be vigilant. We've got to monitor people. We've got to monitor suspicious behavior, communications, travel, lifestyle changes, and things like that.
John, given the steps that you've taken, your company is relatively small, I think fewer than 500 employees, and of course much of your revenue is generated from overseas. So from that perspective, do you have a sense that companies like you, smaller, where a lot of revenues are generated overseas, are they aware of the problem, sufficiently aware of the problem of theft of trade secrets? And in your view, are such companies taking adequate precautions to protect themselves, the kinds of steps that you've just outlined?
Yeah, I think that there's clearly a general awareness of these risks. My feeling, though, is for smaller companies who face such challenges in large markets that could provide so much benefit to them in terms of revenue, they tend to sort of weigh, they do a cost-benefit analysis and determine how much revenue they can generate versus, the cost of not entering those markets. I don't think that they, and they also, they're typically trying to generate as much, get to profitability, so they're concerned about expenditures for protective measures. I think that they have to take a serious look at this and really understand that it's a real threat, and it's a really costly threat. If it happens, the cost of that they'll incur will be far more significant than the costs of putting these preventive measures in place. So,
John, before you were complimenting the U.S. Trade Representative appropriately for the role in your case, but we're all here talking about the government as a whole. But of course, our ambassador from the State Department, our ambassador also in Austria, where the theft occurred, has of course been an enormous advocate for your cause and has really rolled up his sleeves and tirelessly worked to support your business and American business generally, I think.
That's right. Ambassador Eco has been probably our biggest champion, and obviously I'd like to thank him as well.
If I could just add to that, it's been said a couple of times in this room, but one of the things we're experiencing in a lot of these markets is a combination of activity that includes, and Ambassador Hormats said it well, where trade secrets, enforced localization, and other mercantilist policies are coalescing into keeping U.S.-based companies, and including free flow of information, and keeping U.S. companies from competing fairly in those markets. It would be impossible for our companies to succeed and continue to participate in those marketplaces without an all-of-government approach. And so the work that the State Department and USTR and the U.S. government in general is doing in this regard is critically important to our continued success.
Can I just very quick, I would echo everything that both of them said in that regard, but I do think it bears something that John said and Mr. Montoya said bears emphasizing, which is the alternative here cannot be to pull back from global markets, right? I mean, this is the world in which we live in. Last year, GE's revenues, 60% derived from markets outside of the United States. That supported tens of thousands of jobs in the United States. So the answer here cannot be to pull back internally. The answer has got to be able to create better regimes, better systems, better processes inside our companies, and better cooperation in our own government, with our government, and with other governments as well. Globalization is here to stay. This is key, but we got to do a better job addressing this challenge and this risk.
I was just going to make another comment. I think addressing the small company challenges, I don't think small companies necessarily will think about the utilizing government support as a means for challenging or taking recourse against these kind of threats. For us, we did contact the government early on, and I think it's really a critical part of any small company or any company's strategy in trying to respond to these kind of issues.
Well, I think on that note, Victoria, I mean the notion of the public-private partnership, the notion that globalization is here to stay, and the notion that if you are a company, large or small, and you have a problem, we'd love to know it in the government because we want to enforce your rights in whatever way we can, as you do yourself. This is great a way to end. So thank you so much for having us, Victoria. We're delighted to be here.
Well, thank you very much. I want to thank the Attorney General and Dr. Blank, Undersecretary Bob Hormats, Ambassador Morantis, the Honorable Frank Montoya, and Assistant Attorney General Honorable Lanny Breuer for being here today. I second want to take the opportunity of having the microphone again to seek a commitment from the companies and the associations that are sitting at this table and the companies and associations that are in this room and the larger community that is listening to this to both take a very careful look at what you are doing internally to see if there's more that you can do to reduce trade secret theft or the risk of trade secret theft, but also, and I think this is really critical, to commit to share what you find, to share those best practices with other companies that may not be thinking about this as carefully. I think that company to company sharing best practices is absolutely critical. So I'm asking you to do that here today. I think that is not just critical, I think it's absolutely an essential part of making sure that we address this problem. And then lastly, I want to thank everyone for being here today. Thank you for coming. Goodbye.